Barbara, the meeting is live. You're ready to go.
Good, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of Wednesday, May 13th. It's our second Zoom live meeting. First item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to start now with I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes of April 30th at 11 a.m. and also at 7:30 p.m. the same day. Are there any additions or corrections? Steve, if you would please unmute everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, they are accepted as presented. First item now on the regular agenda is a presentation of the official public hearing and adoption of the general fund operating budget for the 2021 school year. I'd like to turn this part of the meeting over right now first to Dr. Prendergast.
Thank you, Mrs. Berkowitz. As was mentioned earlier, today will be the official budget hearing and the adoption of the Great Neck Public Schools 2020-2021 school budget. I would like to introduce Mr. Powell, our Assistant Superintendent of Business, who will give an overview with regards to the budget hearing and presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prendergast. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our third proposed 2021 budget presentation. This morning, I will concentrate on the salient points of our proposed 2021 document. First slide is our mission statement. In developing our budget, our guiding principle is our mission statement, and the words that should jump out at you are innovative. Excuse me, can we get to slide number 2, please? Yes. In developing our budget, our guiding principle is our mission statement. The words that should jump out at everyone are innovative and collaborative educational environment, academic excellence, social and emotional growth, lifelong learners, compassionate, productive members of our society. This is what our budget is designed to achieve. Next slide, please. This page sums up in 2 percentages our entire proposed budget. Our budget to budget increase is 2.98%, and our levy to levy increase is 2.57%. Our next slide is how our money is spent, broken out into 3 areas. We are a service entity providing the service of instruction. It therefore makes sense that the majority of our expenditures are in the area of program, which is instruction. Of all the dollars that we spend, over 82% of it is in the instruction area. Our next slide is a 9-year history of how we have fared with the tax cap legislation that came into effect in the 12-13 school year. As you can see, we have never exceeded the tax cap in any one of those years. And I'm proud to say that for what we're proposing for the 2021 budget is a 2.57% levy to levy increase. Our tax levy percentage limit is 4.16%. Our next slide, every year when we develop a budget, there are issues both legislatively and financially that impact the spending plan we put together, with the 2021 year not being any different. The following are the major challenges that we faced, which are reduction in state aid, a large increase in transportation expenditures, increased enrollment in our special education program, and two major over expenditures in two capital projects that we are undertaking. In addition to pointing out budget challenges, we also like to point out the highlights of what the 2021 budget achieves. Again, it's coming in below the tax levy limit. This spending plan maintains all programs, maintains the Board of Education's class size guidelines, adds secondary staffing, English as a new language and special education teaching positions. We are maintaining our academic intervention services, the English as a new language programs, a continuation of our excellent special education programs. We are maintaining all extracurricular clubs and activities, music, art, and athletics, and we are continuing to provide ongoing professional development training for our faculty and staff. We are again adding 6.9 new teaching positions and 4 teaching assistant positions, while continuing our support for our non-public students and adding funding for our robotics program and bilingual counseling. Our next slide, we're highlighting a number, 8 projects out of the over 30 that we're planning to do in the 2021 school year. These were the largest of those programs, largest of those projects. Yeah. However, we are maintaining our infrastructure by addressing the capital needs of our school district. The next slide illustrates the major increases and decreases in our objects of expenditure. The 4 figures that should jump out at you are an increase in retirement expenditures, a decrease in health insurance, which is really not a decrease at all. In that line were contingency funds for other lines in the budget that might result in the expenditure being in excess of the amount budgeted. In order to keep this budget and the resulting increases in taxes as low as possible, $2 million in contingency funding was taken out of this line. The other 2 items that are material are capital projects. As I mentioned earlier, we had 2 projects that came in over budget, and our transportation or contract transportation expenditures, which also came in excess of $2.5 million. Our next slide are our budgeted revenues, showing you the material increases in that category. The 4 that should jump out, or the 4 that are prominent on this schedule, are our increase in property taxes of $5.3 million, the appropriation of reserves and fund balance to lessen the tax levy at $3.4 million. Then there were reductions of $739,000 in payments in lieu of taxes. 2 of our pilot agreements expired in December of 2019 and will not be in effect for the 2021 school year. And right now, a $626,000 reduction in state aid. The next slide is the determination of the tax levy. We like to show this slide to show the public how we come about with the figure for our levy. The column that I'd like for you to concentrate on this morning is the column titled Preliminary Budget 2021. And as you can see, we start with the general fund appropriation, which is the budget of $241 million. From that number, we deduct all available revenues other than property taxes. And that's how we come down to that second from the bottom number of $212,857,000, which is a 2.57% levy to levy increase. What I want to point out to you all is in the middle of the page, starting with the appropriated fund balance right down to the appropriation of reserves, the last one listed being the employee benefit accrued liability. We are using $5.7 million in reserves and fund balance to balance the 2021 budget. The next few slides have to do, the next slide is the, next slide, please. The next slide shows the ranking of tax rates per $100 of assessed value of the districts in Nassau County. We like to show this slide because Great Neck is the fifth lowest, has the fifth lowest tax rate in Nassau County. The next couple of slides have to do with the rules surrounding our election. It's important to note that this year, all of the votes that will be cast will be done by absentee ballot. We will be sending out absentee ballots to all of our registered voters, which are 30,624. These pages instruct you on how that's going to be handled, in addition to what will be mailed to you. This explains how this election is going to be conducted. Again, the election date is June 9th, 2020. We have to have those absentee ballots in before 5 p.m. that day. Again, we want to remind you to vote on Tuesday, June 9th, 2020. Although you won't physically be going to any polling sites, we're asking that you return your absentee ballot as quickly as possible. We are now at that point of questions and answers. Members of the public had an opportunity to present their questions on this document up to 3 p.m. yesterday, May 12th. And we did receive approximately 4 to 5 questions, which at this time, we will read the question and give you the answer.
Mr. Powell, that's going to be reserved for open time?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Berkowitz. Yes, I apologize. Yes, that's correct. Yes.
That's all right. This was a presentation. For those of you maybe where this was your first time hearing it, we have been doing this budget presentation now a number of times. That's why we went through it fairly quickly. This is the revised budget. I will call it the post-pandemic budget, which reflected changes from the original budget that we presented back in February, which was our preliminary working budget at that time. So our next item on the agenda is item 2B, Superintendent's Report. Dr. Prendergast.
Thank you, Mrs. Berkowitz, and good morning, everyone. As was mentioned earlier, the Governor's Executive Order 202.26 has acknowledged that the budget vote and the election will take place on June 9th. But as we all know, due to the health and safety concerns associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, all New York State school districts will conduct this vote by absentee ballot only. It is important for our residents to understand that every qualified voter will receive an absentee ballot, and that postage paid returned ballot must be received by the district clerk by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, June 9th. Last month, the U.S. News and World Report announced their list of the 2020 best high schools in the country. And we are proud to see that South High School and North High School have been recognized nationally. We are so proud of our students' accomplishments. Our schools offer a wide array of challenging academic programs, and our outstanding educators and administrators go above and beyond to help every student reach his or her full potential. It's an honor that our high schools continue to receive national recognition by the U.S. News and World Report entity. Great Neck North High School was recently awarded the title of the largest DECA chapter in New York State for the 2019-20 school year. Each year, DECA recognizes leading chapters that have built strong local programs focusing on serving exceptional numbers of student members, advisors, alumni, and business partners. These chapters dedicate the school year to academic and career preparation, community service projects, membership recruitment, school outreach activities, and other DECA-related endeavors. This year, North High School had a total of 213 members. Our advisors, Mr. Marchese and Mr. Rodriguez, have worked very hard not only to increase the number of student participants, but to also make the North High School DECA chapter relevant at the school, state, and national levels. Congratulations, well done, everyone. The first robotics competition recently hosted a virtual regional awards, and for the second year in a row, our South High School Rebel robotics team won some very impressive awards. The team won the coveted 2020 Regional Chairman's Award for the School Business Partnerships of Long Island competition, and one of our students won the Dean's List Finalist Award. Well done, Rebel Robotics. North High School also received some recognitions this month. They have received their second consecutive championship title for the 2019-20 Vocabulary Bowl. North Middle School students mastered over 171,000 words this year to become back-to-back champions in the Division II elementary middle school category of this national competition. And our first grade teachers at JFK recently facilitated a family literacy workshop. The goal of the workshop was to teach families strategies for how to best support their children's writing process and independent spelling at home. Using Zoom, families learned about helpful materials to have on hand, different strategies of the writing process, and prompts to help children use a repertoire of spelling strategies at home. I'd like to thank and recognize our JFK administrators, teachers, and parents for participating in this workshop. Lakeville and Parkville schools recently hosted a teacher parade on May 3rd, and it was a tremendous success. And I must admit, it was thoroughly enjoyed, not only by me, but also by our parents, our students, and our entire staff. In a similar vein, the E.M. Baker School PTO will also be hosting a Baker Pride Teacher and Staff Drive-By Parade this Saturday. For those who might be interested, I just wanted to let you know the parade's going to begin at the Great Neck Long Island Railroad train station parking lot, and it will finish at the intersection of Baker Hill and Middle Neck Roads. The E.M. Baker PTO has submitted a parade route, and we look forward to seeing everyone maintaining social distancing measures, of course, in support of our students and our faculties. Fortunately, the weather looks like it'll be a fine day for a parade, so I look forward to seeing everyone on Saturday. I also wanted to recognize for our class of 2020, the governor's decision to keep schools closed, I know has been especially painful for the families of our high school seniors who were so looking forward to prom, graduation, and all of the other end of year experiences that they look forward to enjoying. For the last several weeks, we have been working and discussing different ways to safely celebrate the incredible accomplishments of this graduating class. Our high school and district administrators have carefully considered the preferences of parent and student leaders for these occasions, while also ensuring compliance with the governor's executive orders regarding social distancing measures and regional guidelines for reopening New York. Therefore, large gatherings are restricted through phase 4 of the governor's reopening guidelines, which prohibits us from organizing live events with substantial numbers of participants. That being said, while we can't physically be together for these celebrations, a variety of creative solutions are in the works to provide meaningful celebrations that all participants can enjoy while remaining safely apart. And parents and students can look forward to receiving additional information about several pre-commencement events planned to celebrate our seniors. While this spring might be defined as a season of loss because of the pandemic, I can assure you, our teachers, administrators, and our entire school community is looking forward to and are planning various ways to celebrate the class of 2020. Along those lines, the class of 2020 certainly had the support of our entire school community, as witnessed through the Light Up the Night recognition on May 1. May 1, for those of you who may not realize, was the original commitment date for all of our high school seniors. Our district joined with schools across Long Island for this 20-minute recognition, which was coordinated in partnership with the Nassau County Section 8 Athletics. The Manhasset Lakeville, Great Neck Alert, and the Great Neck Vigilant Volunteer Fire Departments provided fire trucks at each high school, and they flashed their lights and sounded their sirens in recognition of our high school seniors. We thank the community, the local fire departments, and their volunteers for helping us honor our seniors. Earlier this week, Governor Cuomo released the Guide to Reopening New York and Building Back Better in support of the state's plan to safely reopen our state, local businesses, and our schools. As a district, our ultimate goal, in conjunction with county and state officials, will be to determine when and how schools will reopen. Clearly, there are many questions that still need to be answered before such a decision is made. Each school, and college for that matter, will face its own myriad set of new challenges, and regional leaders will be developing a localized reopening plan with the guidance and support from the State Education Department and the Governor's Reimagine Education Advisory Council. I am serving as a member of the Nassau County Council of School Superintendents Reentry Committee to plan for county-wide September reopenings of school, we're hoping. Areas of consideration will be numerous, including health and safety, instructional practices, and mental health needs of our staff and students. However, prior to reopening the schools, many issues, like I said, need to be addressed in support of appropriate safety measures. And that includes, but it certainly is not limiting, opportunities for social distancing throughout the day, and certainly while traveling on school buses, personal protective equipment, the cleaning and disinfecting of schools throughout the day, health considerations, and academic and social considerations as well. Several ideas and solutions have been bandied about, each with its own set of challenges. For example, districts may be asked to consider split or staggered schedules or a blended learning approach to support instruction. As we consider reopening the Great Neck Public Schools, the health and safety of our students and staff will be our top priority. And the district intends to work in partnership with the varied members of our school community to develop a plan to safely reopen our schools for our students. And that concludes my superintendent's report for today. Thank you, Mrs. Berkowitz.
Thank you, Dr. Prendergast. There's a lot more still coming, I know. The next items on our agenda are items 2C through F. I turn those over now to Mrs. Perez, who's the chairperson of our policy committee.
Thank you, Mrs. Berkowitz. Good morning to everyone. Today, there are 4 policies on the agenda for the board's consideration. The first 3 policies are all related and are in revision due to requirements addressing New York State regulations implementing Education Law 2D. The first policy, 5500, student records, is a revised policy. The revision addresses a requirement that this policy outline the practice the district has in place to protect students' personally identifiable information, especially with regard to the use of such information by third-party contractors. The regulations also require that the amended policy be in place no later than July 1st, 2020, and therefore, in accordance with policy 2400, which is board policy development, we are presenting this policy to be submitted for just 1 reading and possible adoption today. Are there any questions or comments about the policy? Okay, in that case, may I hear a motion to accept the policy as read?
So moved.
Thank you. The second policy connected to the first for your consideration is a revised exhibit 5550E, the Parents' Bill of Rights for Data Privacy and Security. It requires that this exhibit outline the practices the district has in place to protect, again, and I always have trouble saying this, personally identifiable information especially with regard to the use of such information by third-party contractors. In addition, based on a recommendation from the New York School Boards Association, the exhibit has been renumbered to 8635E. The regulation also requires that the amended exhibit be in place no later than July 1st, and therefore this revised exhibit is being submitted also for one reading and possible adoption this morning. Are there any questions or comments about? No? Okay, do I hear a motion to accept?
So moved.
Thank you very much. And the third policy in this group of policies relating to information, policy 8635, which we just renumbered, information security breach notification. This too is a revised policy, and it outlines the practices that the district has in place to protect student personally identifiable information, especially with regard to the use of such information by third-party contractors. The policy will be retitled Information and Data Privacy Security Breach and Notification. This policy must also be in place no later than July 1st, and therefore is also being submitted for one reading and possible adoption this morning. Are there any questions or concerns? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you very much. The last policy is not connected to the other three, and it is 9150, staff-student relationships, in parentheses, non-fraternization. This policy emphasizes the district's ongoing commitment to avoiding any situations in which an inappropriate relationship might occur between a district staff member and a student. Following the second reading of this policy on April 21st, it was further reviewed by the policy committee based on comments that suggested that some of the language was open to interpretation. As a result, some wording that was deemed subjective has been deleted, and in addition, the reference to policy 9645, disclosure of wrongful or unlawful conduct or a whistleblower, has been expanded to include the policy's language with a regard to penalties for deliberate or false reporting. This policy is being submitted for a third reading and possible adoption. And I'd like to just add one sentence here about this policy. This is not a child abuse policy. This, because there was some question about the word student and who that affected. This affects adult ed students, any students that are connected with the district. So I just wanted to add that in. Do I hear any questions or concerns?
Thank you, Mrs. Berkowitz. So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Perez.
I meant Mrs. Perez. Forgive me.
Right.
I was looking at Mrs. Berkowitz and speaking to Mrs. Perez.
Okay, we were
Right.
like things.
Well, that's all right. I'm a member of the policy committee as well. So
True.
Well, I was just going to say
we are
that.
one for all and all for one. Thank you,
I want
Mrs. Perez.
The other members of the policy committee, Mrs. Berkowitz
Right.
and Dr. Prendergast, for their hard work and advice when working on our different issues. And on the first three issues mentioned here, I'd particularly like to thank Jennifer Kirby and Mark Epstein, because they were of great help with those policies.
Terrific.
Questions or concerns? Thank you very much.
For those who don't realize, when we go ahead and elaborate about policies, we can spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes at a meeting. Those can represent dozens and dozens of hours of bandying a policy about, discussing it with appropriate staff, as Mrs. Perez just mentioned, and also looking at it from all angles. And that was certainly indicative with policy 9150. So I thank you, Mrs. Perez, and everybody else who was involved and who gave us input. Now, the next item on the agenda is item 2G. This is now the resolution to adopt the general fund operating budget for the 2020-2021 school year. I always feel like Barbara Walters when I say 2020. Anyway, do I have a motion now to accept this budget?
So moved.
Are there any nays? No nays. We have now adopted the budget. The next item on the agenda is item 2H. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Are there any nays? Items 2I, just so you know, this is the proposed schedule for the coming year's Board of Ed meetings. Now, you realize, and obviously we've all come to realize, that everything is in flux. These are the proposed meetings that we hope to have. There may be changes, and you will hear the end of this meeting about some changes again for this year's meetings, board meetings. So, do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Are there any nays? Okay, item 2J and 2K. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
So
Are
moved.
there any nays? Items 2L and M have to do with various projects, capital projects. Do I have a motion to accept?
So
Are
moved.
there any nays? The library renovations was a change order in our favor. And the item 2L, so that you know, is so that we are in compliance with the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, over at Kennedy School. Items 2N and O, do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Are there any nays? These show, if anybody went ahead and looked at them, it shows that we do go ahead when we're doing bidding to work with the consortium, which is other districts as well, to obtain a lower price. Do I have a motion to accept these?
So moved.
Are there any nays? Item 2P, do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Are there any nays? And this, if you chose to look at it, these are in-service courses that are extremely timely, and they will be conducted online. Next, item 2Q, do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Are there any nays? I would like to thank Shai for contributing 5,000 masks that went to our service workers, as well as when anybody picked up a grab and go meal, they were afforded a mask as well to take with them. Items 3A, B, and C, do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Are there any nays? Items 4A through D, do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
So moved.
Are there any nays? Items 5, 1, and 2, personnel, do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
So
Are
moved.
there any nays? Next part of our meeting is open time. Obviously, when we had live meetings in person, we had yellow cards at the back of a room and people could submit their questions. This time it had to be done a little bit differently. I will go ahead and read the person who has submitted a question. I have abbreviated the question then, and it will be directed to the appropriate administrator or person to respond to it. The first question was from Daniel Schweber. It had to do with whether or not there will be split sessions for September when school hopefully resumes, and how would this be paid for? And I will ask Dr. Prendergast to please respond to that.
Thank you, Mrs. Berkowitz. As I mentioned earlier, there are still many questions left to be answered with regards to the reopening of school. But in the event that the reopening of schools might require us to consider changes in student schedules, the district would be utilizing funds from our reserves and our fund balance to cover any of those additional expenses that we may have to incur. Thank you.
And at this point now, there have been no decisions made about, as you referred earlier, to split sessions or any other way that we'll be conducting education, hopefully if we can resume opening in September. The next question or comment came from Alexandra Rubeni, and it had to do with the high price for building improvements. And I will direct that over to Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Mrs. Berkowitz. The reason that public works contracts or contracts for public entities like public school districts are higher than they are for private entities are the rules are different. We are subject to stricter rules than they are for private entities. We have to pay prevailing wages to our prime contractors, our general contractor, our electrician, our plumber, our heating and ventilating professionals, whereas in the private sector, that is not always the case. We are also subject to the Wicks law. The Wicks law is a requirement for public entities with construction contracts greater than $50,000 to have to go out and get separate prime contractors. The general contractor has to be different from the plumber, has to be different from the electrician, has to be different from the heating and ventilating professional. Whereas on the private side of the industry, one person can do all of those different trades or hire those different trades, which would result in a lower cost. So what normally happens is a public works contract, which we are subject to, can be as high or higher than 30% more than what it is in the private sector. And again, the reason is the rules are different for a public entity.
And those are things that we had certainly looked into as well when we first began the bond projects. Thank you, Mr. Powell. The next question came from Robert Mendelson. It had to do with the North High School parking lot work and the cost of these projects as well. I'm going to ask Dr. Hickey. All right, we're going backwards. Yes.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Berkowitz, and forgive me, Dr. Hickey. Before you leave that question that I was asking, there was also another question: was there a way to get a fair market estimate for the work that gets done? I just wanted to explain that yes, there is. All of our contracts, our construction contracts that exceed a certain dollar amount, which they do, are competitively bid. Meaning anybody with the qualifications and the experience can bid on our construction projects, which is a fair and open process. We put together a set of specifications. We put them in a legal note. We print them in trade journals where companies can see what project we're looking to do, and they can submit pricing on that project. We have three levels of oversight. We have our architects and engineers who develop the specifications. We have an independent construction manager that has the professional capability to interpret what is being submitted by bidders. And we also have our private staff, our in-house staff of facilities people that review that submission. So that is a fair and open process where the person who submits the lowest responsive and responsible bid, meeting all criteria, will be awarded the contract. That protects us against collusion and improper business practices. There was also, related to that question, is there a regulatory system that checks, that would check corruption or prevent corruption in price gouging and bidding? We have an excellent procurement policy in district. We have strong internal controls. I know we use the term internal controls many times in terms of what we do financially, and I just want to explain what they are. They guard against fraud, waste, and mismanagement. They are accounting and administrative controls, which are practices designed to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of objectives in the following categories: the effectiveness and efficiency of operations, reliability of reporting for internal and external users, compliance with applicable laws and regulations. This will guard against us being taken advantage of by unscrupulous operators in the construction industry. Sorry, Mrs. Berkowitz, I meant to add that on to the answer when you asked me the first question. All right,
That's
Dr.
quite
Hickey
all
also.
right. You gave Dr. Hickey a chance to go ahead and cough if he needed to. Next item came to us from Robert Mendelson. Once again, these were questions about the North High School parking lot and the cost. So Dr. Hickey, if you don't mind, if you would address those.
Thank you, Mrs. Berkowitz. So the question was about the cost of the parking lot and additional work that's going on at the site now, and would there be an additional cost to the district? So I just wanted to give a little bit of history on the parking lot. The original bid award was $733,300. There were 2 change orders on the parking lot. One of the change orders was for lowering drainage basins and adding additional rings, and then there was another excavation change order. Change orders totaled $73,959 for a total cost of $806,300. While the overall condition of the lot was a major improvement from the swamp-like conditions that existed prior to construction, we were not satisfied with the overall quality of the project and withheld payment to the contractor. We had issues with the pitch of the lot, the height of the drainage basins, and the quality of the striping. The work that you saw going on this past week was the contractor coming back, and the parking lot has been milled. That's a process where a thin layer of asphalt is removed from the surface of the lot. And next week, the parking lot will be repaved and repaired correctly with the correct pitch and modification of the drainage and drainage concerns that existed. Once the parking lot cures, it will be professionally striped, addressing all of our concerns. All of the remediation was done at no additional cost to the district. And in addition, just this past week, we planted 80 new trees on that property as a buffer around the lot.
Good, thank you. We have been hearing for years about problems with drainage and problems with that property being unusable, so thank you. Next question came to us from Joan Greenberg. It had to do with the late bus at South High School, and I will ask you, Mr. Powell, to please address that.
Thank you, Mrs. Berkowitz. The 3:30 late bus at South High was chosen for elimination because it had the greatest dollar impact on reducing the budget. I know there are other late buses that can pick up those students after 3:30. We actually have a bus at 4 p.m., another one at 4:30, another one at 5:20, and another one at 6:30. So the elimination of that bus, although having been there in the past, will cause some slight inconvenience, but we do have other routes to compensate for that. So the reason that one was chosen again was because it had the largest dollar impact on helping to reduce the budget. And it also makes us, creates parity with the north side of town, which also does not have a 3:30 late bus.
Thank you. That's going to be a wonderful segue later on to the next thing I'm going to bring up. I'm just letting people know I keep looking to the right because Governor Cuomo is speaking, and I keep checking to see whether or not we'd be able to have a scoop about when schools will be closed, the last day of school, but there's nothing yet. So next questions, plural, and comments came to us from Josh Forst. These will be the last ones, but they're quite lengthy, and I will take them one at a time. The first one had to do with a GNTA letter. Was there no remote letter, a mutual decision? That's the first part, and I will turn that part over to Dr. Prendergast.
Thank you, Mrs. Berkowitz. In anticipation of the closing of schools due to the coronavirus outbreak, the district and the GNTA Executive Board recognized the need to provide continuity of instruction through a distance learning modality. In fact, we were one of the first districts in our area to provide both synchronous, which is live, and or asynchronous instruction. While there was agreement to provide instruction via live audio, pre-recorded or video, text or chat platforms, the GNTA Executive Board would not agree to provide live video or face-to-face communications, citing privacy concerns. In the meantime, upon realization that the closure lasted longer than anyone could have anticipated, the GNTA Executive Board agreed to permit live instruction for those teachers who choose that modality. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a second part to that question as well. We have 2 board members who are seeking re-election, and Mr. Forst wanted to know if Mrs. Sassooni, as well as Mr. Shi, would weigh in on how they felt about this. So I'll ask first Mrs. Sassooni to respond.
Thank you, Mrs. Berkowitz. I believe that Josh is referring to an undated letter that was posted by the president and the executive board of GNTA to their own website, presumably for their membership. That letter was, to the best of my knowledge, after I made inquiry, not shared either with the administration or the Board of Education prior to its publication. So I really can't speak to its aegis or how it characterizes agreed upon best practices. Still, recognizing that we're in the middle of a public health emergency, and with the benefit of hindsight, I can say that I personally think that insofar as our wonderful teachers are now permitted to utilize both synchronous and asynchronous audio and visual learning methods, I believe that all parties, all stakeholders would agree that this is a marked improvement on the notion of best practices. And lastly, as a trustee and as a parent of a student in the school still, I'd like to once again thank our diligent teachers and staff, as well as our parent body, for working through these challenges together.
Thank you. Mr. Shi? Dr. Lando, have you unmuted Mr. Shi? Because I'm not hearing him.
Mr. Shi must, there he goes.
Okay.
He needed to unmute himself.
Thank you.
I apologize. I muted myself. So
Okay.
my knowledge is leading up to the, thank you, Ms. Berkowitz. Leading up to the week when we decided to close our schools, an agreement was reached regarding the distance learning that Ms. Foster is referred to in his letter. At the time, the privacy, as it is always in this country, was a bigger concern for us to protect our students as well as our teachers. However, I feel we certainly moved far beyond the scope of the initial understanding. A matter of fact, I think we, in fact, embraced Zoom in our district at the get-go. I think several board members passed the free Zoom usage information to Dr. Pendergast in anticipation for its possible use. And we figure if we were not paying for it, which is not true, we still have a nominal fee. It is a huge lift for us not to incur that additional budgetary cost during this unforeseen pandemics. And at this point, I certainly hope that everyone has been using Zoom, including this very board. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shi. I just remind everybody, in case anybody isn't aware of it, this was a letter written from the president of the GNTA to the community. And that's the letter that has been referred to here. Next item here, the 2 biggest factors in the budget, the first one being transportation, and that was a segue from the late bus, I feel. I wanted to make sure that everybody's aware that we have not paid the bus company for April, May, or June. We are currently negotiating another long-term contract with the bus company with a pandemic clause if schools are to be closed in the fall. The next question was about project overruns, specifically about the Baker Auditorium, and the letter referred to Saddle Rock windows. It is actually South High School windows, not Saddle Rock. And I'm going to ask Dr. Hickey if you would please address that.
Thank you again. So the Baker Auditorium and South High window projects both had substantial overruns. John covered that in the budget presentation and the plan that we have to fund those overruns over the next 3 years. You saw the transfers into capital, and that will continue for the next 3 years. At the time that the bid went out for the Baker project and for South High Windows, the construction climate was not favorable due to tariffs and escalating costs of materials at that time. Since that time, all projects have been reevaluated, and where appropriate, value engineering has taken place with those projects. Value engineering is a process where you modify the materials and or the design, and it results in a substantially similar product with a reduced cost to the district. So we've done that where possible. Based upon the governor's executive order, we have continued construction, and also where possible, we've accelerated the approval and permitting process and bidding process for the projects. We've had 4 different projects that have come in over the past several weeks, and several of the bids have been favorable to the district. The projects are coming in at or under budget. And as we move forward, we will continue to aggressively monitor our projects to avoid scope creep and cost overruns. That's when you're doing major projects like this, the way that the project can build out of control almost is by scope creep and cost overruns. So we have weekly meetings to monitor that, and we look to make sure that everybody is doing exactly what they were contracted to do. And we very carefully monitor any change orders. We have not had any change orders in the district since the parking lot issue that we had in North High. That we've had change orders, they've been in our favor.
Thank you. These are things which ultimately, unfortunately, were out of our control. Timing can work for us and timing can work against us. The next item in this letter had to do with an educational plan for next year if schools are to be closed for a long period of time. And I will send that over to Dr. Prendergast.
Thank you, Mrs. Berkowitz. As I had mentioned previously in my superintendent's report, the district will be working under the guidance of the governor's office, the state education department, as well as the Department of Health and the CDC to address all issues related to the reopenings of school in the fall. And we are awaiting further guidance from these respective departments. In terms of an educational plan for instruction, teachers have always had the academic freedom and flexibility to use a variety of approaches to instruction using the various methodologies when they teach. At this time, it's premature to discuss any specific plans related to the fall opening of schools, but members of the school community will be certainly apprised of any decisions once that information is available. Thank you.
Thank you. The next to last comment or question really had to do with remote learning. There was a comparison made between the public school district and private schools, and also that there's differential even within a school or within a grade, really with how teachers utilize remote learning. Dr. Prendergast, would you take that one as well?
I think you actually acknowledge the fact that, Mrs. Berkowitz, the fact that every classroom, every grade level, every school, whether it's public or private, have different expectations. The reality is our teachers, as I mentioned earlier, have the instructional freedoms to academically make decisions with regards to how instruction takes place. And certainly we're very mindful for each classroom teacher, depending on the quality of the curriculum that they're teaching, the needs of the individual students, the grade levels. There is no one size fits all approach.
Thank you. And the last part of the question had to do with state aid. How would we deal with it if there's suddenly to be a 25% reduction, a 50% reduction, a 75% reduction, whatever? So I'm going to ask Mr. Powell if you would please address how in those likely or unlikely events, how we would deal with them.
Thank you
Mr.
again, Mrs. Berkowitz. State aid, although less than 4% of our general fund revenues, is still a significant dollar amount at over $9 million. In the event, as I mentioned earlier, we have already accounted for a 5% or greater than $500,000 reduction in state aid. Should the state come back and tell us that they are reducing our state aid apportionments greater than that, We will address that with the use of fund balance and reserves, which are funds we have accumulated over years for situations such as this. Of course, we could have never predicted that we would be in the situation we're in right now, but fund balance and reserves are for contingencies or unforeseen circumstances that could not have been contemplated at the time budgets were developed. So we are prepared in the event that we suffer a 25%, a 50%, or a 75% reduction in that greater than $9 million figure that we received. Hopefully it won't be like that, but that's what those funds are for. And we will have to wait to see what comes out of Albany in terms of state aid reductions.
Thank you. I just want to remind everybody that it is thanks to the careful planning, and it's something that we've spoken about many a time through the years, of the entire business office, that we do have a fund balance and keep money in reserves. And it's specifically, I used to call this a rainy day account. It is specifically for the unknown, for the things that come up suddenly. A tree going through the roof of a school, a problem with a major leak within a school, and so on. These are things that you cannot possibly know about when you are planning and creating a budget. However, there must be funds allocated and set aside specifically for this. One thing that we're coming up to, and that's something that occurs every year, after June 30th, we see whether or not there is any money that had been apportioned for any one account. And we're always very proud of the fact that we do not go ahead and say, well, let's spend it. You know, we have this extra money, let's spend it. It wasn't used during the year. We put that aside, and it's because of that that we will not be in the same dire straits should there be a reduction in state aid, or a mid-year reduction in state aid, which was not planned for. And we will be prepared for it, and we will somehow be able to handle that. And it's thanks to the wise planning and really the caution that you use all the time. So I just want to thank you, Mr. Powell, for that, as well as the rest of the
Thank
cabinet.
you.
The next
you.
item is the fact that I want to just announce before I adjourn that we will be meeting again on Tuesday, May 6th. This is an annual budget hearing. It will be a meeting at 11 o'clock for all of 5 minutes. It is something that's required by law. It must be held by every district no more than 15 days before a budget and no less than 7 days before the budget vote, which in this case, even though it's being done by absentee ballot, the budget vote date is June 9th. We will have a next meeting after that on Thursday, June 11th. You will also see that on our website at 7 p.m. It will be done again during Zoom. And we will at that point also grant tenure to the teachers or administrators who are eligible for tenure, should they be recommended to us. I remind you once again, and we've said it now repeatedly, there's a very short turnaround time for absentee ballots. The vote itself is less than 4 weeks from now. We weren't able to print ballots until yesterday. The ballots will be sent out with a postage paid envelope. It is not a request for an absentee ballot. It will be the actual absentee ballot. Please mark it and send it back so that it will be tabulated, hopefully finished on the evening after 5 p.m. of June 9th, which is a Tuesday. Now, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I usually
So
say
moved.
drive safely, everybody, on your way home. So in this case, it's just turn off your Zoom. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.